Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. He's here, dude. You're famous. So, Scott, when I was clicking on one of your past videos, like on mine, I was just clicking on it. And I was like, "What?" Because we all. Here's the funny thing. You told me you had a podcast. It's never too serious, but
Mhm.
in your episode that you were on, I think you willed it. We got serious about some like pretty heavy topics.
Yeah.
Um, and when I clicked on your video and I was listening to a little bit of it, which I never do, I never try and go back and listen. I started seeing javelin videos under your name. And I was like, is this the Scott I know? And then I'm just seeing all these. You have like 28,000 views on a video. I'm like, is this man famous? Like, I don't even know.
I don't know. Javelin community is such a small community, but in the javelin community, I think there's a few people who know who I am. But for the rest of the internet, nah, I don't think I'm very famous.
You would think, just like you said, javelin community is a small community. I'm like, if you asked any child, any person, and just be like, hey, would you like to toss a giant spear through the air and hit like the ground or something? Just toss a spear. Just saying that will get any kid like, yes. I mean, that sounds awesome. And one day if you work hard enough, you could probably get paid and be on the Olympics, and people will literally watch you and love you on the TV. You're like, just for throwing a giant metal spear at things? Yes. And then you get a bunch of crazy people, toss them at other people in grocery stores and shit.
Well, every time I work with kids, I always tell them, throwing spears used to be, a deadly thing.
Primal.
Yeah, very primal. You hunt with spears, you go to war with spears, and of course that leads into my safety talk because it can be dangerous at practice. But I think it's interesting because back in I think it was 2016. I think it was 2016. I went to the World Masters Championship in Australia, and I was really blown away on how many people had watched me do like javelin videos on YouTube. And it's so funny because so many of my like clients here locally in the Portland area, they've never watched any of my YouTube videos. So it's such a weird like thing. And I get, a lot of emails and people asking to, analyze their javelin throwing and that sort of thing. But locally, uh, like folks don't really see my javelin stuff. But I think, outside of my local area, it's pretty well known, I think.
I would hate to keep badgering you about javelin and all that, considering you just got off a work call and now we're doing a podcast. So I'm
Well,
gonna
that was IT work. That wasn't javelin work. I
I must
love
say,
javelin work.
I was gonna transition. Do you think that there's any last bastions of like primal things left in society? Because I think what you were talking about, like a lot of people weren't interested in this type of thing, especially like Oregon or any of these other places out there. And it was very, very interesting in Australia. No, Australia is a wonderful place. I've talked to a lot of people from there, but it is kind of a little bit more of like a grittier version than over here at the States, at least. Now there's like all this whole cancel culture thing over here. Over there they're like, what the fuck's cancel culture? Like, it's still kind of like basic, like, get your shit, do whatever, and then it's like, if we got a problem, we got a problem. Over here it's like, if you got a problem, I'm going to tell 50,000 people to make sure that you never work in this town again. It's like a backdoor type of mentality, and I'm like, that's probably why it's so popular over there. I mean, there's not a whole lot of stuff that I can think of that is like a primal thing that everyone can enjoy as much as like javelin maybe it's common, sure, but I mean, it's still like a specific sport. Like, it's mostly soccer, football, lacrosse. You watch football because it's giant pounds of flesh. These people that are like 300 and something pounds, that look like they're fueled with, in, like, I don't know, cloned meat or whatever you want to call it. They're eating like 20 burgers for breakfast, and then they're eating a snack 10 minutes later, and they're running into each other and they're colliding. And that's so primal for a lot of people. That's why you get a lot of fans for that sport. Same thing with basketball, the competitiveness of it. NASCAR, you want to see a car crash but hope no one's dead. You like seeing these explosions and these action things. I don't see a whole lot of that left. I mean, maybe if you talk about like when food gets low, people get to like a scavenging basis, which is kind of primal with gathering food. Back in the day, it was like you killed one buffalo or killed one elephant, and it lasted a fucking week, and you tried to ration it out.
Well, think about it. Australia, like everything that grows over there wants to kill you.
Yeah.
I mean, there is something primal about that. I'm sure. And when I was over there, they kind of laughed at American football because their football is like rugby. It's primal. it's heavy duty. The pads, not so much. They play with broken bones, and they're pretty tough. Don't let their accent fool you. They're pretty tough over there.
Is that what we need then? Do we just need to make sure that like once a day someone's going to try and kill you over here? Like hire a hitman, like there's just a personal hitman that tries to kill you every single day, but like not in like an intense way, like putting like there was a woman that drugged a Advil bottle and she put up like a poison pill in there. And it took 6 years for him to finally decide I have a headache and to take the pill. And she played the long game. And I was like,
Oh
bro,
yeah, no kidding.
I'm not talking about that type of killing thing. I'm talking about like some dude just comes up to you with like a knife and does like how they do in the knife commercials where it's like the downward stab where you can easily block it. And then he doesn't even try and force it. He just waits for you to block it and then goes, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, same time, probably around the same time. And then just walks out. Because then it keeps you on edge, like knowing that there's this one fear. And it's like, I've been in near death experiences. They level you out for like at least 2 weeks. I talked about it like with the pandemic. The 2 weeks of the pandemic,
Mhm.
the beginning, you're like, oh my God, I got to make sure I save everybody in my neighborhood. I'm going to be the best community person at all. And then 2 weeks later, it's like, where's your fucking mask? I fucking hate you. I hope you die in a hole. That's what it went to. It only lasts two
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah. I totally agree. I totally agree. I think there's so much like I know at least in our culture, and maybe maybe that's just a localized thing because I live in a crazy Portland, Oregon area, and we're in the news a lot nationally, and we didn't used to be, but there's such a weird shift in what used to be this beautiful Northwest, and everything was kind of calm. We don't really have any like dangerous animals out here. People are out doing naked bicycle parades in Portland.
Wait,
It's
what?
like yeah, that's another
What?
story.
Wait, hold on a second. Naked bicycle parades? What's this?
Did you ever watch Portlandia?
No.
Oh, you're gonna have to go on. I don't know if it's on Netflix anymore,
He
but you're gonna
goes,
have to.
I
I'm sure
can't
YouTube
explain
has something.
it.
But you have to go and watch Portlandia. Portlandia is it describes what used to be Portland very, very well. And there's just a lot of weird stuff. We have bumper stickers everywhere that says "Keep Portland Weird," and then there are some that say "Please make Portland normal again." But for the most part, there's a lot of weird stuff. We have parades that people like. I don't know what time of year it is, but they get naked and they um, go riding through Portland, and it's like a normal. People don't even think twice about it. It's just a normal thing
Why?
because that's the weird culture that they have. I
That's
mean,
like that's like deleting your history. There are so many cultures when it comes to like the Jewish culture or like Japan, for instance, their history is 5,000 years old. They're doing shit and they don't
mm,
even know why they're doing it. It's like, this is what we've done. It's like, what could we question? It's like when you start seeing charges come out of your account for $5 or something like that. Is it a large enough charge for you to want to pursue what that is and find out where it's coming from? Or are you just going to keep letting it go and hopefully it works itself out? So like 5 years later, you're like, this card's been charging on the same day for 5 years straight. Are you ever going to pursue it? Nah, man, it's just $5.
the weirdness kind of just blends together, to be honest. Because it's just one of those weird things that they do. If you think about like Mardi Gras and how crazy, everyone gets dressed up, and they're given beads to look at your boobs, or whatever it is. It's like there's some unique things that happen in other areas of the country, but Portland has such a massive blending of all of these different things, and it becomes so odd, and there's so much of it that just seems to be normal. You'd have to come out and experience it to believe it, but that, to be honest, has changed quite a bit because of all of the rioting that goes on. And I mean, I still get alerts on my phone saying that Portland has declared an unlawful gathering or a riot, and I'm like, it's like June. This is this should have been over with a long time ago, and no, it's still happening.
You need to change your podcast name to Always Kind of Serious. I
Well,
think
that's to be honest, I was talking to my buddy Dave, and we're on the podcast, and there's so much stuff going on that is like really serious, and it's hard to get away from it. And so it's on our minds, we're living in it, and it's really hard to talk about something and then not have like a serious take on it, because there are like real life interactions and consequences to what's going on right here in front of us. So, and both of us like to kid around, so it's sometimes it gets too serious on a never too serious podcast.
It's kind of like I've been talking about, like, I mean, this has been a topic for the past like 5-10 episodes of mine. Just everyone's getting like on these, it seems like it hit a serious tip. And I'm like, this just shows you what's on the peak of everybody's mind. I mean, my podcast is the best representation of like an instant thought or an instant, like, just it's conversation wherever comes to your brain. And sadly, this is on a lot of people's minds. It's serious stuff. It's hard to be funny. I mean, I
Mhm.
like that Oregon's doing those types of things. I know people are like, I don't want to see naked people on bicycles. We've seen some naked people where we're like, good God, like that is just
They're not
scarred.
models.
I'm gonna drive off this cliff. But at the same time, I like that because you're letting the weird come out. I think though it gets
Mm.
even worse when you suppress it for so long, and then you get some dude that takes his dick out in a Zoom call twice, and that's why we have these freaking things that come on saying you're being recorded. But like we I I judge a person only on really one thing. If you eat a deep fried Oreo, in my town they have deep fried Oreos, and I just see that and I'm like, what kind? I like the Oreo, but I want it deep fried. I'm like, Jesus, like, I'm sorry, I can't get down with that. I'll eat some fried foods, but a deep fried Oreo, I just look at it like, I know it's probably delicious, but do you need that? Like, that just seems like it's not going to help you. You're going to
That's
be
like
hurting.
carnival food, right?
That's welcome to my town of Ocean City. There's a boardwalk where it's like all carnival games and shit.
Uh-huh.
It's fun for
Yeah.
tourism, but it's awful. Like, all right, so about last week, you know what a Wawa is?
No.
Really, it's like a gas station. If you have a certain gas station,
Oh yeah, it's a branded gas station.
yeah, it's all on the East
Yeah.
Coast. I saw a bunch of
Yeah,
Amish people there at 4 a.m. I was like,
yeah.
I have so many questions. One, first of all, shout out to the shirt, the Amish Inquisition. But I walked up to them, I was like, oh my God. I was like, you're Amish. And they're like, yeah. And I can't even do their accent. It's like, yes, yes, or something. It sounds Norwegian a little bit. And I'm like, I
Hmm.
have so many questions. One, can I get you on my podcast? And they just looked at me like stunned. And I was like, okay, that's a
Do they
fail.
know what a
So
podcast is?
probably not. So I skipped to the next question. I was like, how did you get here? I didn't see any horse and buggy outside. Apparently, I guess they had a limo or some type of taxi pick them up, and they're able. I guess this is the moment where they sow their
That's
wild
legal for
oats.
them?
Well, they can sow their
Oh,
wild oats at this point. They can go experience the world and decide if they want to join it or if they want to go back to the Amish. It's that rite of passage at 18.
gotcha.
So it's
Okay.
interesting. I wish someone would have gave me
Yeah,
that
that
choice.
is. Yeah, well, that sounds like a lot of those like reality shows that my wife likes to watch, when the Amish folks they go into this new phase of their life where they get to go explore, other stuff.
Welcome to the
Yeah.
world. Um,
Yeah.
but I was talking to him and I was like, so I was like, how did you order if you're Amish? You can't use technology. And then like the woman just screams in the back. I had to order for all 10 of them. And she had to sit there on the touch screen and ask what they want and then go through the whole thing at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh my God. And I just sat there thinking, I was like, talking to this person. I think we all know like some people we talk to, and you're like, I'm way smarter than this person. Not to be mean, but we just know this person doesn't have, like, some people don't really have the type of intelligence level you do. And then sometimes you talk to someone and they seem like they're way past you, like you're taught. I was looking, I was like,
Hmm.
when people were buying like land in Scotland, like, I'm going to buy this and they're going to call me the Jarl of Derbyshire or whatever. I was looking at these Amish people. I was like, I could go into your community and you guys would be a bunch of toddlers walking around a god. I don't know why. Just power went straight to my head. And I was like, this is what happens with power. As soon as someone sees something, they could take advantage of somebody, or if they could like manipulate somebody, or they're above somebody, it goes right to their head. And I was like, I had to leave them. I was like, thank you for being a person. And I just walked away and they probably thought I was weird as shit, but I don't care. But it just shows power. Like, I could easily go into wherever their village is and start being a god. Build me my houses and let me show you what gambling is. They're like, what's gambling? I'm like, it's an amazing thing where you can win money, but I'm going to make sure you lose it all, and just go through my hands.
That always makes me think about like going back in time, thinking, "Oh yeah, if I knew then what I know now, boy, my life could have ended up so much different." It's that idea of pursuing some sort of like growth in intelligence and
Yeah.
experience and being able to do things that you had no idea even existed.
Oh,
Say even 10 or 20 years ago.
I've said many a times, if I could go back to my 12-year-old self and just beat the shit out of them,
Teach them
just
some lessons.
exactly. But would you want to go back in your own timeline, like life wise, or would you like to go like back in time anywhere? Like, would you like to go forward or backwards?
It's tough because if I could maintain what I know, right, and travel backwards and do it again, sure, I think I'd like to do that. Because
You would
there's a whole bunch of areas that I think, boy, I really missed out on an opportunity thinking back. And it's because I was inexperienced, or I didn't have self-confidence back then. It's like, there could have been some really amazing experiences, and I think I kind of skipped out because I was very quiet as a kid. Is not very like confident in who I was or abilities, or stuff like that. So I would love to go back in time and redo some stuff.
someone asked me how I ask out like girls, like, because I think that's for a
Hmm.
kid or a guy at least, asking out like somebody is like the hardest thing. And I'm pretty sure we both probably have many opportunities we missed out on, just like
Oh
maybe
yeah.
maybe one day, but not now. So what I do now is I just go, imagine you just got diagnosed with like stage 4 cancer. I know it's horrible, but I'm like, that gives me the courage to go say, hey, what's up? Like it's that. And I'm like, I don't see, there's so many things I'd go and tell my past self, mostly because I thought it was going to be less than what it is now. And I think that's a big issue with like kids nowadays. They're told that it's this type of way, or it's like a dream scenario. And then when you get older, you're supposed to understand what taxes, problems of the world are. But I guess I've like absorbed way too much, because people are like, you're old for your years. Yeah. I'm fucking freaking out about the CCP. I'm freaking out about our government. I'm freaking out about so much shit. And I'm like, this is kids nowadays. There's a 7-year-old out there that probably is fucking Alex Jones level insane, just with the amount of information he's found on some fucking Reddit page that some 47-year-old in his basement decided to upload to the fucking internet. And I'm like, I don't, I would, if I was going to go back in time, I wouldn't go in my own life. I would go back in time, way back to the day, to observe things, because I think a lot of the shit that we're told is not exactly how it went down. I think there was a lot of other stuff back there that we're not paying attention to. And I think that's very crucial. And it kind of forms your history in a way. It seems like nowadays we're
Oh
built
yeah.
on this crooked lie system. I would say it seems like we're going to tell you the truth, but we're going to like, back in the day, they used to write in history books of like, we conquered them, we smashed their heads against rocks. That's in the timeline of thinking. That is what they wanted to show, because it showed a sign of strength. And then now today, it seems that's evil as shit. So it's weird to see
Hmm.
how that paragram, or that dot, I guess that whole thing has
Yeah.
shifted. So I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
what to do.
Well, you think about history, and so much of history is written by only certain people, and it wasn't like this really common thing like we have today, where everyone's telling a story of what they ate for breakfast. Way back in the day, people are trying to write down stuff that's a little bit more significant, something that was substantial at that time. And then you're missing out on all those little nuances in what their society really held valuable, what it was like to be just a common person. It was always like, scribes, documenting stuff for the high and powerful, who of course want to keep their version of history live for generations. So you don't necessarily hear all of the truths out there. I'm not like a religious guy, but I'm very fascinated by like the Bible and religion, and a lot of the history that you read in the Bible, you just kind of wonder about, whose perspective is this? Is there some
Yeah.
other intention behind it? Is it really um, a biography of this person, or is this like purposely written this way to influence other folks? But I think being able to travel back in time and to experience that stuff that we have read and questioned, but to be able to go back in and be a fly on the wall, and hear conversations, to see how people interact, boy, wouldn't that be something else? And then to be able to actually document it in some way that would be relevant,
Like you could still
to
record on your phone and
yeah,
just
right.
show. This is what I talked about before, was like, how many like, all right, so today, censorship, for instance, there had to be a
Mhm.
form of censorship back in the day. Like, you can't say certain things. Church will lock you in your house and never let you leave, I guess, is
Oh
probably
yeah, tar and feather you.
that's a good, I guess that's a bet. We have an easier form of censorship. If some person, is that chocolate milk you're drinking?
It's a protein shake.
Okay.
Actually,
All
it's
right.
not as good as chocolate milk. I'm
I
sorry.
saw it. I was like, holy shit, is that chocolate milk? My man. Um, but I was like, if you thought about scribes writing stuff down, how many people go, I don't like this part of the story, and they just choose not to write it down. And then now we don't know that part of the history is what I'm
Yeah.
starting to look at. Like how many things throughout history start to be told another way and start to be, there's so many perspectives we don't understand. Whether like for instance, when you're a kid, there's a crucial time that stuff sticks. And there's a crucial time where stuff really is just the other times it doesn't stick at all. For instance, when I was a kid, they used to show you the same Martin Luther cartoon on TV. I thought he was just shot. I didn't know the government killed him. So this is what I started finding out was that the government had a planned assassination against him. And I was like, hold on a second. Hold, what are you talking about? Why didn't we focus on that in school? It's like, oh, well, you saw the cartoon, right? Yeah, but there was none of that shit in there. There was a bunch of other stuff. And it starts to let you know like the interesting stuff that they don't teach you that kids would actually adapt onto. I don't know
Hmm.
if it's a fear of them turning into like woke, but then I have an issue with woke too, because woke isn't what we think is woke. Woke is a bunch of people trying to burn down businesses and shit because they label them as one thing, and that's probably not what they are. So I'm like, I don't,
Hmm.
we're at conflicts, and it's not because of our fault, because of something completely different. So now I just say, fuck it. If somebody gets mad at me for something I say, screw it.
Yeah, well, gosh, those are really tough ones. I mean, to be honest, it's really tough because we're living in a weird time for us in just the conflict of like what would normally have been like normal people just deciding that they disagree on something and going a little too extreme. And I don't get the woke culture. I'd like to be educated. I like to read about stuff. I like to talk to people. I like to get opinions, and I don't generally hold opinions that I don't agree with against them. I generally I try and be a pretty good person
I
and
think
and
you're a
talk
good
to
guy.
folks about stuff. No, thanks. But I kind of think that we've gotten to a spot where everyone is so angry with each other for disagreeing with them, and if they don't agree, then they don't want to be around them. They don't have nothing to do with them. We had this weird situation in our area where some school board folks were determining new policy for local school district, and they were talking about adding a requirement to have the new pride flag and the BLM flag flown in every school, in every classroom, like in the entire district. And so they were debating back and forth because right now it's like the American flag, which is kind of the standard thing, and and then they wanted to add these additional flags, and and they were debating or sort of debating back and forth about what this policy, how it should be written and that sort of thing. And the person who was for putting these flags just didn't want to hear any disagreement.
Shut
It
it
was just
down.
like shutting them down and basically saying, I don't have time to educate you about this. This is what we need to do because it's the right thing to do. And that's the kind of stuff I don't remember. I mean, maybe it's because I'm just, where I live and what I do, but I I thought that debate was like a good thing. I thought, having conversations. I mean, you have so many conversations in your podcast. You get to have this sort of discourse with people without, coming to blows, right?
Well, there's
But
been times I've
now they
had
don't even
that.
allow it.
There's times I've had that, like I've gone against someone that was woke. And it's not the idea of woke is the one issue I have an issue with. The issue is that the shutting down, the I'm better
Hmm.
than you mentality, that you don't have a say in what this is. Because, I talked about this to a past guest, Eric. He was like, does it ever feel like men are getting like the bad end of the deal? Like now it's all men. Shut up, you're a man. You have no say here. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to go farther than that too. And people joke at that. I remember I told a comedian about, she was like, nobody ever punches down. I'm like, that's a fucking lie. Let's talk about Sam Kinison, Kevin Hart,
Oh
Dave
yeah,
Chappelle, like a list of fucking people. And
yeah.
she ended up wanting me to edit the episode and cut out some things that she said. She felt like it made her look bad.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, I'm not going to cut out what I say because I know what's in my heart. I'm not an evil person. And she was like, do you call me evil? I was like, I'm not. If the shoe fits. No, she's a good person.
Yeah.
But it's a concept of like, if we really look at, for instance, all right, this is gonna be a tough one to tackle because woke is a good idea. It's a very, very good, strong, and it's a lot of people that care about people around them. And I think that's the point of it. But it also goes a little bit too far because it's just like when I learned that George Washington's teeth weren't made of cherry wood, they were made of slave teeth. I lost my shit. I literally lost my fucking mind to where I was like, I can't believe this. I've been lied to about. That's the same thing with what they teach in the education system when they show you the true history. And I don't think that's the only issue. I think there's a bunch of shit going on. First, it's lying to people, making them think that it's this whole thing and it's not. And I'm just like, that's why I said about Oregon, be honest about your shit. Just be 100% honest about it, and they live here. They're around here. They're going to change. They're going to evolve. They're going to understand. You got to teach them. That was a past thinking. Every anthropologist I've ever talked to has said that was way back then. You got to think in that mindset. And I said, I understand that. And a lot of people don't want to. They want to see, they see it as a horrible act and somebody needs to pay. But my buddy said this in an episode. He goes, about the Canadian thing in schools down there. Someone was mad that there wasn't going to be some type of like flag or something that was got lowered because of this, all the bodies that they found, which I'm like, I don't know. I'm not over there, so I can't give good insight to it. But he goes, and people are upset that they did lower flags for 12 white people that died a week before. And I was like, that's pretty blatant the way I heard it. I was like, that's terrible. They should lower the flags. It's equal, right? And he goes, what I'm saying is those that's like if my great grandmother died and I treated it just like my kid just died. It happened 200, 300 years ago. Sure,
Mm.
it's if it's a flag issue, lower it if it's going to fucking please people. But people were so outraged that there was nothing even said about it. I'm like, it's in fucking articles all over the place. I'm like, you have to understand. We just need conversation. We need to talk.
Yeah.
And when you shut down the era for conversation, I can't deal with you. That's the issue with woke is that you see it with Jordan Peterson talking to people. There's someone that's ready to cut him off. Did you say this? Did you say they're jumping to assumptions and putting words in your mouth now? And it's like, hold on, motherfucker. I let you talk for 15 minutes. Let me talk. That's the whole thing.
Yeah. I agree. I don't have a problem listening to woke people talk about stuff as long as they allow for some sort of conversation. I've not met, and I mean I live in a very liberal woke area, and I don't talk to very many people who are willing to have a conversation about it when someone disagrees with them. I listen to other people talk and they agree with whatever the topic is, and they'll go back and forth just basically patting each other on the back about the conversation, but they won't carry on conversation with anyone who disagrees with them. And I think that's where all of this growth comes from, is to be able to have some sort of conversation and challenge people in their thoughts and do it in such a way where you come away from the conversation feeling like, yeah, that was good. There was something I learned out of it, you know, that I gained out of it. But I don't see that happening a whole lot. And I think part of our like social media limits that because everything is short number of characters and people are just wanting to give in, you know, whatever that quick punch is. There's not really a conversation. And I think we have this culture where that's what people are doing. You know, kids right now, you know, they're text messaging or, you know, doing their Snapchats or doing whatever the quick little, you know, snippets. I think one of the reasons why I think you're at such an advantage in this particular area is because you actually speak with people constantly, where a lot of people don't. I'm surprised. I mean, I feel bad for my kids because my kids, they've been in, I got two kids and they've been in quarantine basically. And the amount of communication that they have with people in the outside world is very small. I've been encouraging my kids to use Zoom and bring their friends on and actually be sort of face to face and have conversations because it's a completely different growth experience when you get to do that. And the other thing is you know, you can get the facial expressions, you get those, you pick up on those little things, and you can kind of gauge the direction that a conversation is going based on some of those cues. That is lost if you don't have those experiences.
It's difficult because the way I look at it is like I okay, it's gonna be a little bit of a mouthful, but conversation is so important. I think it should definitely be done more in a room, but I also think there's a way to enhance your intelligence. It's an energy exchange. You need to talk to people. You exchange energies back and forth depending on the whatever the vibe of the conversation is. If I can make it funny or if I can make it serious,
Hmm.
it's something that's very, very important. And when you close off that area to be able to do so, you're not truly learning. And I think a lot of this isn't really our fault. I think if we talked about time, for instance, I think this timeline that this society is on, I do not see a fix for. I do not see the utopian ideal that everybody wants unless it's intervened by like aliens or something like that. It's because we've it's like if you have your house, for instance, you build your steps to up to your door. Now you built them, but you know at some point they're gonna break because you didn't do it the right way. You did it half-assed and you used it the cheaper method. You know at one point it's gonna be like, well, that might be way down the line. And now it's way down the line, and we're starting to see all these cracks that have been there for a while that we've been duct taping over with, and now it's all starting to unfold. And that's why I'm like, man, we have more alike than we do different. I don't care what you want to do. I don't care who you are. As long as you're a good person, I like you. But there's so much like with social media that shows you more and shows you so much about who you can be and who you want to build up your persona to be. And I'm like, man, like it's sometimes you see somebody post something, you're like, that's not you. You're not that type of guy at all. Like it's either really bad or it's like in such a like a back patting way where you're looking at the person like, you don't fucking think that. You just want a bunch of people liking your shit. It,
Yeah.
that's what happens. And it's very, very hard because I think, like, for instance, they just made a new device in Japan where it's called the third eye. And it's a giant metal camera that goes right over your like forehead, like a third eye. And
Oh
what it does
God.
is it'll pop up a screen on your phone. So when you're walking, because so many people were walking into traffic, we're walking into boxes, we're walking into other people, then now they have this device so you can still see where you're going without ever having to look up your head from your phone. This is the bad part, is because it's going to shift into this thing where you're not going to, we need devices that are going with these devices to be able to sense emotion, to be able to sense text, be able to, and I think this is where Joe Rogan talks about the Neuralink is so important because you'll be able to read people's thoughts. You'll be able to sense intent. Like if you can get a facial recognition in this Zoom call right now between me and you, and on the corner it says like what we're saying, how much of it is actually how we're feeling, and it gives you a percentage bar. It's going to help a lot of people be able to decipher if this person is just getting his words jammed. Like, because I'll cut things down just to be able to save time in an episode, like just to be able to quick summarize it for you, give you the cliff notes of it. And then someone would be like, but you said this. And I'm like, no, the meaning of that, if you look back at my episodes, was this full discussion I had on it like this. But people don't want to look into that. People don't want to do the research. They want to read the first thing, find out they can get superpowers by jumping off their roof, and they're going to fucking jump off their roof.
You know, so my day job is in IT, and so I get exposed to a lot of different like IT related stuff and different technology. And I always think about the power of AI and how artificial intelligence is really growing. And what you're describing is, you know, reading facial expressions and then determining what those things mean. And I look at it as that's machine learning. You know, that's us teaching machines how to understand human emotion, facial expressions, tone of voice, all of those things. Because at some point, that will turn into, you know, those Boston Dynamic dogs, you know, the robots,
Yeah.
you know. And for us as humans, I mean, it's been generation after generation of face to face, in person communication, and it's really just been the last, I don't know, I mean, since the '90s, really, since things have turned this direction, in that we need all these devices to then understand the other person that you're communicating with. I mean, you think about like emojis coming into the picture, you know, you're talking about these other things where it maps your face and turns that into an animated emoji. And there's all these other pieces that you're like moving towards to get back to where we used to be before the '90s in face-to-face conversations. You know, it's such a weird thing, and I think that this is going to go someplace where AI is way better at doing stuff than humans are, and then where do we sit in this world?
See, I
You
have two
know,
thoughts on that. One is that they just annihilate us because they realize we're worse than whatever for the planet. But
we're the plague for them.
yeah, but I also look at it like if you look at like how your mother raised you, and then when your mother gets old, you got to take care of your mother. I look at it like the robot probably would look at us like we need to help advance you to so you don't kill yourselves because you guys are heading for inevitable destruction. So we have to find a way to fix you. Now that means two things. That either means they're gonna try their best to change us and make us into something different and it's going to kill us all, so accidental genocide, or it's going to be this new enlightenment type thing where they find a way to be able to help us out in such a way where we can start being sustainable again. But it needs to be an outside force. And I think it's interesting how there's so much here still left to discover, and we're not going to be able to discover it because everybody wants to discover another planet. Somehow that's in the grass view of things. Like Bezos wants to start putting all the industrial factories and stuff on the moon and shit, so it doesn't hurt this planet anymore. I'm like, but then you're fucking up another planet too. So it's like you got to kind of understand here, like the foundation in this timeline is like completely trashed. I'm like, if there's another timeline and we do it again, if it's going to repeat itself, I have no clue. But there's just so
Mm.
much about this world where it's like nobody tells you this when you're a kid. Nobody tells you it's going to be this much. And I'm like, yeah, I can see why mental health is on such a increase. All the kids have their phones and they get 50 Amber alerts for like bomb just went off. This just happened. And it's like, this all has an effect on the psyche. The brain is one of the most sensitive things. We need to find a way to be able to get that into a better state. There needs to be more things implemented in that manner and stuff. I'm like, fuck it. If it means playing video games all day, go ahead and play video games all day. If that really calms yourself and gets you into this whole relaxation, I just think there needs to be more methods or more goalposts set up, not for blocking things, but for pointing you in the correct direction to where you as a person want to go individually. School should have teachers or should have student capacity numbers to match the teachers that are there. If there's one teacher, he shouldn't have 50 kids. He should have 10. He should have, and that's 10's pushing it, in my opinion. You got to give each individual kid a certain amount of time compared on what their reading levels and all their math skills are on. But put up some posts, like ask a person, what do you want to do, man? You're 30 years old. What do you want to do? Man, I don't know. I'm good with my hands. I like building things, and I just don't like an office setting. Well, I'm going to give you a list of jobs, and you try them all out and find which one you really enjoy doing, and then we go from there, okay? And then we can hopefully pay you enough to be able to afford your home instead of you working in an office job that pays your bills and you're fucking miserable all the time. So you bring a gun into the work, and then everybody's fucked. That's always what happens.
Well, I just want to, because you kind of moved through it really fast. I think your point on the robots becoming more of a parental figure wanting to take care of us, I've never heard that perspective, and it's worth bringing back to the forefront. That is, to be honest, that's an incredible sort of idea of what technology would do that I've never heard before, and it cracks me up because the idea of other people, they say, oh well, robots are going to find us useless and they just want to get rid of us. But you kind of touched on, well, maybe they're actually going to care about us and want to take care of us and treat us well, like, we're going to treat our parents when they when they get old, and frail. That that's a pretty awesome take on where AI could potentially go. I
Well,
don't know if it's gonna go that way, but
yeah.
that's kind of a nice thought, right?
I
People would
mean,
freak out a lot less if
I
that's the direction that we went.
I might be super pessimistic at times, but I like to add the optimism in there. I mean, if you look at like Terminator was a huge movie back in the day, and then eventually people thought like robots were ending up taking over the world, and we were building self-sustainable AI to be able to research. But like there was one I saw an interview with where the guy asked the robot, "What are your dreams?" And the robot just goes, "One day I want to be smarter than humans." And you're like, holy fuck, like turn it off. That's everyone's thought. And I think we were heading that direction for a long time, was trying to find ways to create robots that will be able to live in our household, be able to do our chores, and be able to be like functioning members of society. And then
Mhm,
I think we branched off of that with all the Terminator movies and all the fear of like existential risk when it comes to those. And now we're starting to put them inside of our bodies, trying to enhance the human perspective. And my mind is like this: I think people are naturally going to hit another evolution stage, which is like we talk about psychics, for instance. I've talked to like tarot card reader, for instance. Everything he's fucking said has came true except three things. So I'm just like, I'm not fucking ruling anything you say out. And I've been able to do things I can't really explain. And there's some things like people talk about alien encounters and psychic experiences and stuff like that. I think there's
mhm,
something like another frequency that eventually, after maybe a couple generations, we'll get to another form of evolution. But then we're enhancing it faster with the man-made evolution, which is the Neuralink into your head. I think
mhm,
eventually, after a while, people are going to start being able to feel each other's energy levels. Like when you're in a room with someone and you're having a conversation, if something feels off about the air and you're like, why does it feel so like dark in here? And you ask the guy, like, how are you doing? He's like, my dad just died. You're like, oh my God. And it's like I could sense it in the air. You can sense where to go with the conversation if you're talking to someone, they just go, okay. Okay. You're like, you don't really want to talk, do you? No, I'm having a really bad day. You're like, all right, man, I'll leave you alone. I think eventually people are going to have a better feel for that, a better type of vibe for that. I mean, I'm the best example. I've talked to so many people. I know where to take a conversation. I can match an energy level. I'll have a really fast recording, then I'll have a really slow recording. you can sense where to go with it. If I bring up a topic like, let's talk about this, and then your face will drop. I'm like, you can see that, you can sense it. I think people eventually will get to that point where they will have this more in tune with that ability, but we're going to force it with the neural link. And I'm like, look, if you rush shit, it's going to be like I said about the steps.
Mhm,
Eventually, there's going to be some cracks and then it's going to break. I'm just saying, let it get there
mhm.
naturally.
Yeah, it's for me, it's kind of an interesting thought about those neural links really coming in and enhancing our senses and being able to interpret maybe things that our brain would naturally overlook. You're talking about the energy in the room, the little facial expression that someone might give you. Some people, they don't pick up on that stuff, and to have technology pick up on that and then bring your attention to it, that there could be some enhancements there. Have you ever met anyone that had such a weird way of expressing themselves that they were really hard to read, to determine what they were thinking or what direction they wanted to go? Or
When I was doing, I've been really good at it so far. I think I've probably gotten pretty lucky about it. I had one guy who I eventually, like 400 or like maybe a year or so later, I had another person that knew that person, went to school together with that person. I had no idea. And they're like, "You knew this person?" I was like, "Yeah, I didn't even." He had social anxiety. And
Mhm.
this was back when it was audio only. So I couldn't sense where to go. And I couldn't tell if he was pausing to let me talk or if he was just, so it was like a 2.5 hour recording. I cut down to like 45 minutes. But
Mm.
I think it's a gift too. Like some people naturally have an ability to have a conversation or all this type of stuff, but I think it's also a tuner. You got to tune that shit sometimes. Some people, if we talk about people that don't have that ability, you got to teach it too. You got to learn it at one point. I think that just becomes, if you talk about a kid that doesn't know how to talk to people at all, well, look at the kid's life. Does he talk to people out in his outside life? Is he shy? Does he not say anything? Does he just go home and play video games? And even then you learn communication skills by telling some dude you're gonna fuck his mom on the internet. Like that's that's a
Yeah.
skill too. I mean, I don't know.
Well, those are the fears that I have with my kids. That if I don't know that I would have had the same perspective without going through this pandemic. Both of my kids are pretty social. My younger daughter, she was like, one of those leader kids, always wanted to participate, always wanted to help the teacher, always wanted to help set up whatever the activity was. Um, Pretty good friends. And then the pandemic hit, and she kind of went into her little shell. And sometimes it's hard to just get her out and go shopping at the grocery store, or get out of the house. And so I kind of have to force that, and in the hopes that she's going to come back out of that shell and start communicating and developing some of the things that, to be honest, in the real world, it's such a good skill to have, to be able to communicate with people, to get along with people, to understand how the communication's going, and be able to understand those facial expressions and whatnot. You're talking about a little earlier about people learning and growing and becoming more, and there's so many different aspects of our lives that we allow ourselves to kind of sink into, and we stop that growth process. And I think with the podcast, I think that's great because you get an opportunity to communicate with a lot more people, touch on topics that you maybe didn't even know about, and then at the end of the podcast you go and you learn a little bit more about it. There's this growth thing. Kids going from elementary, middle, high school, and then potentially off to college, and then not having any skills developed by the time they start their career, phase of their life. A lot of it has to do with these sort of environments where the kids are not interacting the way they were. The parents weren't participating in those conversations around the table anymore. They're the TV's on, or the phone is in their hand, or whatever it is, and they miss out on these little things. And those cracks of the stairs that you're talking about, they're developing right now because we're not getting our these later generations into a place where they've got some nice foundation to build a solid framework to then grow and build that solid um, character that's going to support them and others around them in the future. And I think that's where a lot of this woke politics are going. Not having those conversations and shutting them down. I mean, the whole thing is, it's not. foundationally strong. Exactly what you were talking about earlier. I kind of fear for it, to be honest.
My initial thought was like, when I look at people, like, I mean, I went to school a little bit for, I got my degrees in chemical dependency, but I also went to school for psychology. I didn't get a degree in that. I just took extra classes for that because I like that angle. I only got an associate's, and it's at a community college. So fucking
Hmm.
tossing that out there too. I went for 4 years, whatever degree that is you get after 4 years. Um, but when I was going there, like especially now, I pick up notes, and when I talk to psychologists about this on the show, I talk about like you get to be able to pinpoint, like you're just examining people like 24/7. It just doesn't stop. It's like a doctor who examines a bunch of things possibly wrong with you because they know so much and they're trying to think where their brain could put something in a category, whether it's behavioral, genetic, any of these types of things. I started looking at
Yeah.
people like, what moment in your life did you take in for the good or did you take in for the bad? There are some people I meet where I'm like, someone took you behind a fucking shed and did something to you. And then there are some people I met, like, you must have had like some really good experiences to craft out this way. And I had someone at my work, we got a new boss, and she comes in, doesn't ask my name or anything. And we're just talking back and forth for like 5 minutes or so. And she goes, "Oh, you're Robbie." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "They told me about you and I get it now." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "They said be careful of your personality. Like you're a bit of a crazy guy." And I'm like, "What?" I'm because exactly how I am on the show, I am in real life. I'm just all over, like having fun, like trying to joke and all this type of stuff. And then
Mhm.
she was like, "No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing." I'm just because a lot of people will be like weirded out. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a bit much," but the best thing I've ever assumed or I've ever created in my life or I've ever asserted to was that you could never call me a good person or a bad person. You just call me Robbie. I mean, yeah, you take me how you get me, and most of the time it's positive stuff. I'm never really negative unless I'm in my own depressive slump, and even then, I just don't want to talk. But I think
Mhm.
it's important
Yeah.
for people to understand, not to understand what a person's going through, because we can keep saying that over and over again, but how many people actually do that? But to look at the fact that we're all in this kind of together. It's a little bit of a thing. We all live on a planet. We can live in the same state, we can move states, whatever you want to say. You just have to understand is that like we all have a capacity to learn. Now, do people want to accept the learning or people don't want to accept the learning? That is a different question. That is a different answer as well, too. There are some people that are refused to it because of how strong they feel and how much they've learned about something. There are some people like we call woke. Woke is like somebody puts a pitchfork into your hand and says, "Here you go out into the world. Your government sucks. They did all this stuff to all these people." And you're like, "What? I got to fight." That's it. So they're doing it for good
Yeah.
reason. They're doing it because they care about the people, but they don't understand the full capacity of a lot of things. And then they start attacking people that might not necessarily be attacked. Same thing with people, other people too. It's not just woke. It's everything. Everyone's at each other's throats, whether you're in this group or you're not. If you're not in this group, then you can't be my friend. If you're outside of the group, then you're my enemy. And it's like, okay, but it boils down to so much more. When this is when I say I think it started when the ball started rolling. When the ball first started picking up a little bit of momentum back in the way days, and when America was being born, every country was being started. They started looking at like these founders. Like, let's take the owner of McDonald's for instance. Do you think someone came to him and said, "Hey, everything you're going to create is going to create a major problem in the future for future generations dealing with diabetes, so much of this stuff because your stuff is just so cheap"? But you could fix that if you just don't start McDonald's. You think he listened to that guy or the guy that told him he was going to make billions of dollars? He said, "I'm going to make billions of dollars. Fuck those future generations. I don't even know those people." You don't care about the people that aren't your family either or your friends. If you don't know some fucking dude and you're like, "Hey, if you just save that cucumber on the table, it could be for somebody else." Well, I need it though. It's like, do you really need it though? I do need it. I'm having dinner tonight. And then you grab it. You don't care about the fucking people because they're not in your life. And that's the thing, is when the ball started going down, is when you stopped caring. All these major businesses stopped caring about things that weren't going to affect them, but they were going to affect other people. And then that's how we got into the standpoint now where it's like, why is everything so fucked? It's like, because the people that did all this shit didn't give a fuck about the people that were following after them. When you leave a hotel, what do? You don't clean the fucking bed and sheets. You don't do any of the laundry or clean up the room. You fucking leave because you know a maid's going to clean it up.
Yeah. It's funny because there are so many different parts of our society where, of course we do kind of get put into different groups, right? Everything becomes tribal at some point in time. You find your sports team that you identify with, and then all the other sports teams suck. Or racial groups, or sexual preference, or whatever it is. People find their groups, and they sort of they kind of cling to them, and then you limit your perspective of what's outside of that group. Um, I think that the idea of looking into the future and thinking about, considering what these impacts might actually be. The McDonald's, not knowing, early on what it would be outside of just a really successful business, and could exist around the world. Uh, Not knowing that it's potentially going to be the primary meal for a lot of people around the world, and it's going to impact their health very negatively. Yeah, I mean, think about that kind of stuff. We do have kind of a generation right now where they say that they care about the future, right? They want to make changes now so that our future is sustained and happy or healthy or whatever. But then the actions that they take right now doesn't seem to lend itself to a real positive future. The writing, the constant shutting people down, the type of communication that's going out, and the lack of discussion. I those types of things, it's like they're kind of in conflict with each other, don't you think? I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to be thinking in the future in a positive way if the actions that you take right now are really, really, you know, detrimental. Like,
That's why I was talking about the human species ending. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I,
remember the AI takes over.
I'm not too optimistic on the future. I actually fear for a lot of the kids that are coming up because I'm like, I think it was so my grandpa said this to me. He just goes like, "Why the fuck is every millennial and every person your age depressed as shit?" I'm like, "Well,
Hmm.
think of what has added. It might not be worse than the fact of like we're never have to worry about somebody coming over here and taking us over, which I mean we kind of do, but not as big as a fear as it was back in the day. You never had to worry about getting drafted off to war, all this type of shit that you had to experience, but you had those common things, those giant major ones. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have stuff to expose you that the government is sacrificing a statue of a child in front of a giant wood effigy of an owl named Moloch. You didn't have to worry about any of that Bohemian Grove shit. Epstein, all this political corruption, all these
Hmm.
people. You didn't know any of this shit, but it was working in the backdrop. And I was like, Canada's still on lockdown. I started thinking, I was
Hmm.
like, Canada's on lockdown, and there's some Canadians have been fired up about this, but they've been dealing with China. So Chinese government wanted to come over and train their troops in Canada and asked them if they couldn't do a deal where they were going to give them a bunch of money to be able to train their troops over there because they wanted to practice in the cold. Because somehow every single country is obsessed with Antarctica right now. And I get it because that's one place that is like vastly undiscovered as much as the ocean is. And there's probably a lot of good information there. Any secret Arctic base is fucking Antarctica is like the main hit spot. But
Hmm.
so they're still in lockdown and stuff. And everyone's like, what the fuck are we doing? Why can't we go out? And now we have to have a pass to show that we're able to go. Like we're supposed, like when my town went into lockdown, you had to have a little thing saying that you were going to work and you had the actual job schedule and everything, or you couldn't leave the house and it was a $5,000 fine. When you do that, think of this. If you're doing shady shit, is it easier to do it when your parents are sleeping or when they're awake? It's easier to do it when everyone's locked inside of their fucking house and they're not able to go anywhere. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm just pointing out there's some shit that you should be looking at that actually might be the truth, but it's like the lab situation. Nobody could. Did you know the censorship now has took the ban off the lab theory? So now you can say lab theory and all that, so it doesn't get banned off.
Yes.
So I'm like, what the fuck?
Yes.
Like, I don't care
Yeah.
about conspiracies. I don't care about this. I'm not trying to lie. I just want to know the fucking truth. And if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck, man. You can say whatever it is. You can say it's a unicorn. It can identify as whatever. But I'm gonna say, if it's the truth, I would like to know what it is. Don't hide me from it.
Hmm. So you were talking about, why are people so depressed? I think, your grandpa knowing what human behavior looks like and why are people depressed in a world where there's so much to do. And I think about purpose, life's purpose, things that you're keeping your time occupied with. I wonder if, the cave person way back in the day had depression issues because they were constantly on alert. They were constantly doing something to survive, and we live in a society where everything is really taken care of right? You think about all the stuff that's necessary to do, so much of it's already done for you. So now you're left with less purpose, less things that you're working on or staying active with. And so the human brain starts to do some weird stuff. And a lot of the kids are they get that quick hit of attention on social media. How they posted a picture and everyone likes it, or no one likes it, and it takes a mental toll, but there's nothing else going on in their life that they have purpose for at the time. So I think it's kind of a weird, maybe a new thing for humans to experience, which is real depression. uh, I'm sure that depression has always existed in some form, but I think it being so prevalent right now might be related to people just not having stuff that they're working on, occupying their time, or having, like I said, purpose.
I don't think a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with now is new. Maybe a couple things, like if we talk about like maybe the depression rate getting so high. But I
Hmm.
was talking to a Greek mythology professor, and I had found a Greek mythology tale that happened to do with transgender. So this
Hmm.
has been these topics have been around for a very long time. The Native Americans also talked about this as well too, is that believing that they were the wrong gender or something of that sort. This is
Hmm.
common core things that have just came into our society today, but they've evolved into something different, and now we have technology to be able to do a lot of things about these types of things, which I don't think is bad. I mean, I've talked to plenty of people who are trans that feel like they should be a different person, have the surgery and everything to do so. I don't give a shit about that. I'll be do whatever you want. It's not me. I don't
Hmm.
care. Um,
Yeah.
I, but if you tell me some person called me homophobic because I wouldn't date them, and I was like, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not. I swing for the girls. I'm sorry. Um, but it comes to this point where if you look through society, like I bet the caveman was probably depressed. I bet that's probably why they started drawing on the walls and shit. But I don't think it was at
Hmm.
this level that it is now. And I think the main crisis that everybody's dealing with, at least for me too, self-identity, trying to find out where do we fit? What is the
Hmm.
destiny? Like any person in their 20s really doesn't pay attention to when they're drinking and having fun and partying. It's your party years. Well, the party years have now turned into where the fuck am I going? I don't want to be a loser. All that's what life is now. And it's like, oh, you'll find it. Yeah, sure, we'll find it maybe one day. But at the same time, it's like some people don't want to wait. For myself, I don't know if I don't want to be 40 and 50 when I find out what I want to do with my life. I want it to happen now. So I'm trying every possible outcome is why you see people hustling, trying the best to reach their goals and stuff. But how do they know if the hustle's going in the right direction? Eventually they're like, I didn't want to be a rapper. I wanted to be a tapestry weaver. And then they just get to this whole other thing. And I'm like, oh, see, like this is where people start getting stressed out and they start future tripping. Future
Hmm.
tripping is huge because everybody's shown what could happen, what could happen. This is what's going to lead to. This is what's going to lead to. The future is here. The future is this. You get so obsessed with the future, you can't worry about the present. And then you can't worry about anything like that. So then now people are going, trying to find the reverse to it. And they'll be like, I'm going to worry about the past. Stop. Worry about where we're at right now. What are ways that we've grown and what are ways that we can still grow without shooting each other in the foot? And I'm like, this is where
Hmm.
we have depression issues set in. People don't know where to go. Your kids, God forbid, eventually will get to a point where when they decide to graduate high school or when they finally go out on their own, it's going to be very fucking scary and they're going to have to make moves. And for a while, they might be in a place that they don't want to be in. You know what I mean? But then they're going to find something and you're going to give them that same exact advice. You're going to find where you need to be. I have faith that you will turn into the person you want to. A lot of kids don't want to fucking don't just are scared of
Yeah.
that waiting.
Yeah. I have a senior in high school right now. He's
Oh shit.
graduating next week, and I have had these conversations with him. In fact, just what is it, Thursday? Yeah, just this week. I had a conversation with him about doing some of the hard stuff. In order for you to grow, in order for you to handle experiences in a good way, you have to have some sort of struggle at some point in time. If life is easy for you all the time, when the hard stuff hits, you won't have any experience or ability to deal with it. And he's had I would say an easier life than I did growing up, and maybe I did from my parents, but for me, there's so much, like, you have to identify opportunities, even if there's a risk involved. Identify those things and then decide whether you're going to pursue that or you're going to just kind of sit back and take the easy route. If you consistently sit back and take the easy route, then you miss out on all of that mental training, the toughness, the maybe it's even physical toughness that you have to go through in order to then be prepared for when something even bigger comes down the road. A lot of these high school kids, they haven't really experienced a lot of the tough stuff. Now they'll say, "Oh, it was tough. You know, I had all these different things going on in school, or my parents were divorced, or whatever." But what I'm talking about is doing the hard stuff on purpose. Like, think about working out, right? Sometimes people enjoy working out because you get the endorphins going, that sort of thing. But
3 hours on the elliptical, it gets every voice to stop in my head. I'm so happy
yeah,
about
there
it.
you go. See, but the thing is that you do some of these hard things because you know that there was going to be a side benefit. But by doing it and putting in the effort at that moment is sometimes very, very difficult to do. And then to mentally fight through continuing it for your 3 hour elliptical, that prepares you for other stuff that you're going to experience down the road. I've been trying to stay in shape and be consistent with like lifting and now running more. And to be honest, I don't enjoy it during the process, but I love the side benefits of it. And this will prepare me if something else comes up that maybe I come out of retirement and throw a spear again, I'll be more ready for it. And I always look at these other things that happen. Are they tough? Well, I've handled some pretty tough stuff already. That's probably not going to be that big of a deal, and I'll be able to handle it a lot better. And my senior right now, I kind of fear that I haven't put him through enough hard stuff for him to be really prepared for the hard stuff that will come. My hope is that he'll take it head on instead of like scooting around it and trying to take the easy route. But that's, I think, the problem in a lot of these teenagers right now is they're not taking the hard path. They're kind of taking the easy path. They expect things to be handed to them. They expect other people to do things for them, and and they don't often take that harder road, which ultimately will probably make them a better person, and again, you do those things, you teach that to the next generation, and the next generations get better and better. And I don't see that happening in our society.
I think a lot of it too, like people talk about millennials still living at home. I was like, yeah, a kid's gonna live at home probably around the age of 30 right now if they're not being pushed out because of the sad fact that
Yeah.
it's fucking expensive to survive, man. Like out in the world right now, the prices have gone up with everything. I mean, I'm 23, I still live with a parent. I still live in and I pay rent and everything like that too. But everything in my town is 2 grand a month just for the building, not for the
Hmm.
appliances that go with it. And I'm like, fuck, like it's you start to realize a lot of things when it comes to like you you got with all this bills, all these payments, and then on top of that, you're trying to be happy. That's a big one right there, man. That's like where I start
Hmm.
looking at like there needs to be a better system in play. Like, why is everything gas is up to $3 over here? So I'm like,
Yeah.
there's this stuff, and it's like you're eventually like I talk about it like my buddy who left his job and he was like, man, I'm just sitting around the house all fucking day. I got nothing to do. It's been a month and a half. I need to get a job. I need to get a job. I was like, you're not ready. They go, what do you mean you're not ready? I was like, because you're saying it and you're talking about it and you're festering on it and you're going to force yourself into a job you necessarily don't want. And it's going to lead to the same exact action. You're one day just going to be like, I'm getting a job and you get a job. But saying you need a job, that's where you're off because then you're
Hmm.
automatically going to grab something, whatever gets thrown your way. You work at McDonald's, then you get stuck in that for 30 years, and then you hate your fucking life and you end up tying a belt around your neck and getting found dead in a closet. I don't know.
Oh,
It's that's what it is though, is you need
yeah.
to understand is that everyone feels this pressure on top of their head, much like you probably do too, but kids feel it
Hmm.
way more. Younger kids, generations below me feel it more because and I think it starts when you're a kid when people
Hmm.
tell you all the things that you can be a president, an astronaut, then you're 30 years old and you're not those things, you start to feel like you're a complete failure. And that's with everything on society. What it shows you on your phone is like, oh, Post Malone did this. Oh, Jake Paul did this. Oh, this or this or this or this or this. And you're like, damn, I'm not doing any of that. And then you start to get in this slump of like, you might be a loser. And then that's when the depression starts hitting in. And that's when depression is
Hmm.
there to be the only thing there. And that's the issue. You don't want it there, but it's the only voice. It's the only thing to say,
Hmm.
hey, guess what? This guy's doing this and you're a fucking loser. That's what it says to you. And then you got to try and find a vice to make sure you can calm that storm, or you hopefully find what you're looking for. But there are a percentage of the population that just feels like, I'll be good. I got it all planned out. I got it all figured out. And I think that does come with a little bit of scared, a little bit of feeling too, hoping and praying or just banking that it will work out one day. Like people tell them it'll work out. I'm like, hopefully it does. I really hope for a lot of people out there it works out. But at the same time, man, you can't bank on something that is like pixie dust or imaginary. You have to
Yeah.
try and go out and make connections, go out and talk to people, go out and live your
It's the
life a little bit.
actions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be the actions. There's so much about the kids. Um, they don't take the necessary actions. Some of the more successful kids, they take action. Some people would just talk about it and they think, oh yeah, someday, but then they don't take the actions to get anywhere. It's one thing not to have the ability to set a goal and work towards achieving it, but if you're not really taking any of the initial, what do you want to do, and then establishing what those little action items are going to be, you're not going to get anywhere. Sometimes, you said you're, in your 20s and living at home. I was the same thing because I had a pretty decent job, and I knew going out on my own would put me at a disadvantage financially. And so I lived with my dad through, I think, my early 20s. And I didn't really move out, get my own place until financially I was ready, because I didn't want to be in the same spots that like my parents were and my friends were, where they were just working a job just to live and they couldn't do anything extra. Well, if you can't do anything extra, then where are you going to go? Well, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to be stuck in the same spot over and over again. So I think setting those goals, figuring out what those action items are, and then pursuing those action items, and then doing it in a way that's not stupid, not setting yourself up for struggle or failure, but setting yourself up for challenge and things that you can, like, overcome, and that grows you to that next spot. I don't think it's a bad thing to stick around and stay home, and do things, pursue those things when you don't have the financial burdens that so many people already have. And money is one of those things it's really tough. It's really tough. If you don't have money, it's hard to live life and grow and do things that, a lot of other people you see doing, those folks that you see on social media. Oh, they're doing all these things. Well, they've got some other things that are helping them out. And one of those is probably money. Money is necessary in order to get to these other places, but that also means you got to have the time to do it, and those other pieces, taking those action items. I'm hopeful that my next generation, my kid, once he graduates, they'll stick around. He'll pursue college, pursue, a career path, but not like immediately move out and start spending money on just trying to live, but rather, you know, be a little bit more financially sound so that he can grow at a faster pace than I was able to when I was a kid. But man, I would love to go back and do that again.
You really
You
want to
know?
live the old days, don't you?
Oh yeah, I think I'm living in the good days right now, but I think that looking back, I go, gosh, there were a lot of things that I could have done so much better. But fortunately, I'm in a good spot right now, and like the podcast. The reason I'm able to do the podcast is because I've kind of set my life up in such a way that I have that time to dedicate to it, and I have an interest in doing it. The javelin stuff, same thing. I'm in a position in my life where that is important to me, and have designed my life around being able to do that, and that satisfies that piece inside of me. It's my day job that is probably more of a mental struggle, because I have to be positive about my everyday going in and doing something that doesn't satisfy those other needs.
Positive
The
in IT, that's got to be a hard one.
Well, yeah, that is. That is, yeah.
I always
But
talk
it's
about,
good to
like,
be able to pursue these other things.
see, there's two things. One, if you're if you own an IT firm, you want to hire people that are frustrating to talk to. I don't really speak that good of English, because you get the
Yeah,
person to hang up. So if they're calling for a return, then they want a refund, and like that person's talking to for an hour, you just give up. Fuck it, I don't need my refund. You hang up. So then you go, you keep your money, Or you get someone that's really good at their job that's like, okay, let me help you with this, let me help you with this, and is very calm and easy to talk to, and then gets it done in a quick minute. So it's not a hassle. But I don't know. IT to me, every time I call, it's a bad experience. So
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree, and I try when I have those experiences with other folks. I understand where they're coming from. I've been in IT for a long time, but I've also been on that other side and needed that support, and I try and deliver it in a friendly way that lets people think that they weren't stupid, and that their problem, the solution that they're searching for was easy to get to, and they don't feel bad about something that they may have contributed to the problem.
I give you guys credit on just even being on the phone with someone, because there are sometimes I'm like, man, I remember in school I tried to do a study on how many like people at an IT department just went to the roof of their building and just thought about jumping off. Because in Japan they have that. In Japan they have nets around buildings for when people jump off, and I'm like, that's got to be
Oh.
like that at an IT department. How many people just sit there and unload a fucking horse load of you're a piece of shit for not helping me get my internet fixed, and then you're just like having a bad day, your wife just left you, someone just died in your family, and you're like, click the phone down, walk up to the roof of the building and just go jump.
Well, it's really difficult to find an IT person like who's really a competent IT person and still has the ability to communicate and do customer service stuff in a good way that the customer appreciates. It's a hard world to be good at both of those things.
Got to hire more voice actors. That's what I thought. Customer service people and voice actors like the same people, because you have a dude that picks up the phone. He's like, oh my, this is tragic news. And it's like Christopher Walken. You're like,
Yeah, right.
holy shit, it's Christopher Walken. It's like, nah, man, I'm just here to help you with your internet. You're like, that was fucking awesome. I was gonna call you and call you a piece of shit. And then you came at me with Walken. Like, oh my goodness, you
Yeah.
do any more? And the guy just starts rattling off a list of impressions. The next thing you know, you're fucking forgetting about your issue. You hang up and you go, shit, I was on the line for 4 hours. I still don't have my internet fixed. And you fucking call back.
I think that's where your AI comes in. AI can take care of all of that.
Oh, I don't want a Terminator coming to my house.
No, no, not that kind of AI.
Did you call at 7:45 a.m. and did you curse out AI 1264562? It's like, I did. Did you call him a trash piece of shit? I did call him that. Okay. And then the thing just rips out your fucking heart and pulls it out.
Yeah, confirms your address and comes to pay you a visit.
Maybe robots will help us. I don't think so,
Yeah.
though.
Yeah, no.
It's like, no, they're going to murder us all. I mean, come on. If you're a
Yeah,
robot
yeah.
and you end up being smarter than humans, would you not look at us like, well, if we look at the earth, they're obviously hurting the earth. So this is the home we live on now. Until we can get off this thing, we have to exterminate the problem. When you have rats in your house, you exterminate the problem.
Yeah, that's kind of what my future of AI kind of that's what I see. I don't know about the parental figure, but I like your perspective a little bit better about them wanting to take care of us.
They will only take care of us if we give them bodies that don't function well. Like if you give it a toddler's body, like
Hmm.
not to where like their arms can still move full circle, but like to where they can only move like the Ralphie from Christmas Story, where he's in a blanket all wrapped up.
Yeah, right.
Because then if it's like, I'm going to fucking kill you, you're like, oh, I give a shit about this. It's like, yeah, you just
I don't know. If you see those Boston Dynamic robots, boy, I don't think we're going that direction. Have
dude.
you seen those Boston Dynamic robots?
Are you talking about the person that runs and then they can kick it over and it gets right back up?
Yeah, that and the dog looking robots, and they got this like crane deal on the top of their head that picks up stuff, and yeah,
I feel
yeah,
comfortable I can kick that thing's ass.
yeah. Did you see the Boston Dynamic video where they had like they were at a shooting range and they were shooting guns and targets, and the
It
the
was
the guys
shooting.
were coming over, and yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. You're gonna have to jump on YouTube and look for that one.
Oh my God. I don't know if I want to
Uh,
look at that.
no, it'll freak you out. I don't know how real it is, but it freaks you out.
There are
It's
some,
worse than Terminator.
we talked about letting the inner kink out. I watched a video where the only thing they have this thing called ponying, and it's legal in New Orleans. And it's when you dress up as a pony. And I just watched a 45-minute video of people in gimp masks running as ponies, and then another dude, like a person on like the chariot and whipping the other person. And they would go through the tracks. Only place is New Orleans. And I'm like, oh my
Are you
God.
sure?
Yeah.
I'm sure they have that in Portland.
They
Sure of
have
it.
ponying there.
Oh, I'm sure of it. I mean, they
That's like,
got naked bike riding. I'm sure they have it.
Some places, I mean, come on. Bicycle riding naked is different from dressing up like a pony and fucking
I
running
don't
off
know.
into the woods like a
What do they call them? Furries? You ever heard of furries?
yeah, my buddy's into that.
Yeah, that's a big thing in Portland too.
Is it that bad though? I mean, I
I
can't get on with
I
all the
think so.
hair. I want
I,
less hair as
I
possible.
well, I worked for a guy who was a furry, and he'd dress up, go to conferences, dress up as a rabbit, and there's like this big culture of of furries, and
Why a rabbit?
it's
Why?
kind of it's kind of
What's the
odd.
moral behind the rabbit?
I don't know. I don't know.
Like
I
year
don't
of the
know.
dog or year of the rabbit? Like what they all have meanings. What is the what why do you choose the rabbit? I like to be quick, in and out.
Yeah, and I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know if it was quick. I mean, it's like this big, you're talking about Ralphie, a big rabbit suit that's like, big old fluffy, big old ears, and you can't run anywhere. I mean, I don't really fully get that culture,
Well,
but it exists in Portland.
it just goes, are you going to take the suit off? It's like, no, we're just going to dry hump until something happens.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Oh
That's
God.
funny. Yeah.
Scott, you've given me enough of your time, man. Where can people find the Never Too Serious? It seems like we had a little bit of serious, but we also had some laughings in it too.
Yeah, we try not to be too serious, but yeah, there is some seriousness. Folks can find the podcast Never Too Serious pretty much anywhere. Spotify, even iHeartRadio. You know what? I just discovered that it's on Audible from Amazon. So we are in a lot of different places. Folks can also see us online at nevertooserious.com. And you could probably even find us on Twitter, but that's not really, I don't know. I'm a little hesitant about Twitter.
That's how I contact you.
I know. I know. You're the only reason I'm on Twitter.
Perfect. But there's a thing for Apple Podcast people listening. I
Mhm.
had emailed Apple because a lot of my results weren't showing up in other countries and mine wasn't really showing up in Apple at all. A lot
Hmm.
of podcasts are not showing results on Apple Podcasts because of the fact they send an email. Anchors just they're having distribution issues with like three other types of things. So it's not like your podcast is gone. It's probably just on a more on a different platform. So it might not pop up
Hmm.
in this first search results. So Never Too Serious. Look at it anywhere. Just Google it and you'll find a bunch of options where you can choose it and click what you want to listen to. Scott and his wonderful co-host. I don't know his name because he's never been on the show.
Dave.
Dave. Thanks for listening, everybody, and stay tuned for another episode Out of the Blank.